Today on BCPOV, I demo this crazy linkage fork on some pretty rough terrain. Will it be any good? Stick around to find out. Our road trip across America continues. We've made it pretty far around the continent now, and it won't be long till we're back at home. But we're not done just yet. And today we're moving from Tucson to Phoenix to meet up with some new friends at a bike shop called Spartan Rides. They're a mobile bike shop that specializes in demoing bikes. From road bikes to e-mountain bikes, they've got it all. But unlike any bike shop I've heard of, they also demo specific bike parts, like wheels, forks, and shocks. This way you can try before you buy, which is a lot better than putting that expensive part on your credit card and hoping you'll like it. And today I'm here to demo the Trust Shout, one of those crazy newfangled linkage forks. Ever since seeing these pop up on the internet, I've really been wanting to try one, but without spending the $2,000 to own one. After all, this kind of fork is still new to the mountain bike world, and the jury's still out on whether they're any good. So why would a company like Trust go to all the effort to design one of these when a normal telescoping fork does the job just fine with less moving parts? Well, a normal telescoping fork does have some disadvantages. For example, when a normal fork moves through its travel, as the stanchions slide past the seals, there's friction there. This friction means that the fork won't respond as well when rolling over small bumps like roots and small rocks. Another big disadvantage is brake dive. When a rider brakes using a traditional fork, their weight shifts forward and the fork compresses. In this compressed state, the fork isn't as effective, and the geometry of the bike changes as the front of the bike lowers, making it less stable. Trust claims to solve or at least improve on these issues with their fork. So let's see if these claims are true, or if these problems are even a big deal in the first place. Back at Spartan Rides, Tim installed the fork for me. Yes. The setup is pretty similar to a normal fork, with 2 air chambers to fill, some compression and rebound dials to adjust, and a brake caliper to mount. And while we were there, my wife Yuka is demoing her first e-bike, but you'll have to go to her channel for her video about that. So with the bikes ready, we hit the South Mountain about 20 minutes away. This mountain is by far the most popular riding area in Phoenix. In fact, we've come at a really busy time, when everybody has arrived for their after-work rides. And with all those people crossing paths in the parking lot, our original ride of 5 people has ballooned, and will only get bigger as we ride. Today's ride is gonna be a little chaotic. But as we head out, things start out pretty relaxed with a cruise up a gravel road. And while South Mountain is known for its tough, rocky descents, it's the climbs that are the most challenging. In fact, the people who ride here often are forced to become proficient technical climbers just due to the sheer fact that there's no easy way up. Almost made it. In fact, the guys we're riding with today take pride on getting up the hardest stuff they can, and sessioning uphill features is just part of the culture here. Nice. But with his new fork up front, I'm having some issues getting up stuff that I didn't have in the past. The fork seems to have raised the front end of the bike up, which has shifted my weight rearward, changing the balance.
Alright, that's enough for me.
To help with this, I've added 10 psi to my rear shock to help balance things out a little. It definitely helped, but I still wasn't quite comfortable with the fork. I think this is just something that would take a little extra time to adjust to.
Alright, that's enough.
Once at the top, we turn around to go down National, the trail we just ascended. Finally, I get to see what I'm really curious about. Just how good is this fork when it's pointed downhill?
Alright, time to really test this fork out. Oh, it is quite good, isn't it? Alright, let's see.
Brake's a little noisy right now, must be a little misaligned.
Nice and quiet. It definitely feels stiff.
The first thing I noticed is that there was very little flex in the fork, and the cornering was confidence inspiring. The fork doesn't compress into the corners, which really leads to a stable feel. As we continued down, we arrived at what is probably the most well-known feature on South Mountain, the waterfall. With what is basically a boulder field, everybody here has a story about this feature, whether it's good or bad. In fact, the waterfall is kind of a rite of passage for mountain bikers in this area. Either you've done it or you haven't. It can be extremely intimidating for many first-timers, and with all the random rocks, the way down is not obvious at first glance.
Where was the line?
But with some inspection, the three main routes down start to appear. The line on the far left, which many say is the easiest, is also the least direct. There's the line on the far right, which is the most popular. And the center line, which combines the two previous lines. I went pretty slowly down the most direct line, and over each step, the fork felt a little harsh. The fork really wants you to ride aggressively at speeds to get the best out of it.
How did that feel with the truck?
Fine. Yeah, I think that shines at high speed.
Yeah.
And trust, yeah.
Where are you from?
Slower speeds, maybe it's a little harsh.
I think that's what.
As we continued down, there was a cool rock slab off to the right to mess around on.
Everybody on the rock. Oh, listen to that brake. Yeah. Nice. Oh. We got a little bit of everything on that.
In fact, virtually everything next to National Trail can be ridden if you're good enough. For example, this feature can be ridden slowly as long as you make it up that step at the entrance.
Nice.
But if you've got the skills, hitting it fast and jumping into it might be the quickest method.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
But one false move here and your ride could end at the hospital. The final part of National is high speed and super rocky. This should be a good final test for the fork. So, after a ride on one of the roughest trails in Arizona, what are my first impressions? Overall, I would say the fork has a very damped, smooth feel. Although it felt harsh off the top at slower speeds, it felt fantastic at higher speeds like we saw at the end of the ride. Vibrations transferred to the handlebars at these speeds were greatly reduced compared to a regular fork,
Oh, taking the wrong lines everywhere.
which helped a lot with hand fatigue and arm pump. At the same time, the fork also felt a little dead, and I wouldn't describe it as playful. Cornering was fantastic as the fork doesn't dive and the geometry of the bike remains largely the same. Combine that with the stiffness of the fork and the frictionless travel, and you've likely got one of the best cornering forks on the market. Climbing with the fork takes a little getting used to as it effectively raises up the front end of the bike, since the fork has an initial rearward axle path instead of a more vertical path you would see on a telescoping fork. Another negative for me, but a positive for some, is the attention that this fork gets. People really want to talk about this fork, and as odd as it may seem, I'm a bit of an introvert. It's kind of like riding a Cannondale lefty fork in that way. People always have something to say about it.
Hey, you said there's a transformer on your bike.
That's right.
Optimus fork.
Another small quibble that I have is that there's no place to mount a fender close to the tire like you can with a traditional fork. This is particularly important for me, as running an effective fender makes a big difference in keeping the mud out of my eyes and lens on my often wet home trails. But the biggest negative for me and a lot of people will be the price. At almost $2,000 US, it's nearly twice the price of a telescoping fork in the same category. While many riders might be willing to fork over the cash to be on the cutting edge of technology, most mountain bikers I know would definitely think twice before spending that much money on a fork, no matter how good it is. Overall, I thought the fork was very good, and in many ways it's an improvement over a traditional telescoping fork. Linkage forks definitely have a future in mountain biking, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of these on the trails over the next few years. And I just want to thank Spartan Rides for allowing me to demo their fork. I love their business model, and it sounds like they're doing a lot for the mountain biking community in Phoenix. Keep an eye out for their brand new brick and mortar store in the future. But, as always, thanks for watching, and stay gnarly.